All right, so these are the sum and difference identities. And we have our base, look at the first one, we have sine. So sine of A plus B, this is inside. So if we have two angles that we add together, we end up with sine of A, cosine B, cosine A, sine B. If it's minus, we just put a minus there. Cosine is cosine A, cosine B, sine A, sine B. And you notice the signs are opposite. And so the way I like to remember it is sine is a sharer and cosine is a control freak. So with sine, he shares. Sine, cosine, cosine, sine. See, he's sharing with cosine. But cosine's a control freak. So cosine says, we go first. So it's cosine, cosine, sine, sine. But this is the opposite way you should think of things. So if it's plus, it's minus. And if it's minus, it's plus. But it's just pairing them up. So it's sine, cosine, cosine, sine. Cosine, cosine, sine, sine. And you notice it's just the angles being plugged in there. And we'll do an example right now. So the way we can use this, if you have sine of 15, there is no 15 on our unit circle. So sine of 15 is not going to be one of our nice exact answers. But if you take 15 and separate it into 45 degrees minus 30 degrees, these two are on the unit circle. These two do give us our nice exact values that we know. So we can use the difference formula. So this would be sine of 45 degrees cosine 30 degrees because he shares. If it's minus, we put minus. And then it would now become cosine of 45 degrees and sine of 30 degrees, which we can now simplify. So sine of 45, right there, rad 2 over 2. The y value is sine. Rad 2 over 2 times cosine of 30, which is rad 3 over 2, minus cosine of 45, which is rad 2 over 2, and then sine of 30, which is 1/2. And we end up with rad 2, rad 3, it's rad 6 over 4, minus rad 2 over 4. And putting those together, we end up with rad 6 minus rad 2 over their common denominator of 4. And we now have an exact answer for our sine. All right. And if we check this with our calculator, you can see sine of 15 is the same as the square root of 2 minus square root of 6 minus square root of 2 all over 4. Same answer. All right, so let's try another one. So what two angles can you think of that would make 105? And we're picking from here. So if you see right there, 60 and 45. If you can remain in quadrant 1, it's great, but sometimes you will have to branch out. But like 60 and 45, so we could do addition. 60 degrees plus 45 degrees. You could also do 135 minus 30, that would be 105. But let's stick with this one. So this would become sine of 60 degrees, cosine of 45 degrees, plus now, and then it'd be cosine 60 degrees, sine of 45 degrees. So we have that sharing, sine, cosine, cosine, sine. So sine shares with cosine, and then cosine goes, but he's going to share with sine. It's a nice sharing situation, same sign. So sine of 60, again, that's rad 3 over 2. Cosine of 45 is rad 2 over 2. Plus cosine of 60 would be 1/2. And then sine of 45 is rad 2 over 2. And we end up with rad 6 over 4 plus rad 2 over 4. And they're not always the same, but there we go. And checking with our calculator, same answer. All right, let's do a cosine now. So two angles that would add up to make 75. So we need cosine of what? So we could do something like 45 take away 135. But if you remember, cosine is even, so it doesn't really matter what we pick. We could just right off the bat change it to a 75, and now we could say cosine of 135 minus 60. Put our degree symbol on each one. And there we go. Now we can use it. Remember, cosine is selfish. So this becomes cosine 135 degrees, and cosine says, I'm selfish, so I'm going again. And so sine is left at the very end. And because it's selfish, you change the signs. So sine 135, sine 60. All right, so 135, our cosines are all sitting right here. So it's negative rad 2 over 2. And then cosine of 60 is 1/2. Plus, and then sine of 135 is the rad 2 over 2. And then sine is rad 3 over 2. So simplified, this would be negative rad 2 over 4 plus rad 6 over 4. And so we end up with rad 6 over 4 minus rad 2 over 4, which is rad 6 minus rad 2 all over 4. Checking with the calculator, same exact answer. So far, so good. All right, the next are going to be radians. So let's try one together, and then you get to do the last one yourself. So don't worry, the answers will appear. All right, let's try it. So we have 17 over 12 pi. So if you look at our unit circle, we have, if you notice, 6, 4, 3, 3, 4, 6. Their common denominator is 12. So we just need to make them all look like 12 first, and then we can find two numbers that add or subtract to make 17. So if we look at our unit circle, you can see that we have pi over 3, pi over 4, and pi over 6. Now all of these will have a common denominator of 12. So multiplying each one gives us this. So we could have 7 pi over 12 by adding these two. You could have 5 pi over 12 over here, but we need to make 17. So I see 20. 20 take away 3, because I know the 5 pi over 3. By multiplying 4 top and bottom, I get 20 pi over 12. And 20 take away 3 would be, you guessed it, 17. So coming down here, we can say that this is sine of 20 pi over 12 minus 3 pi over 12. And remember, these, when you put them here, make sure that they reduce down to our exact ratios up there, our exact radians. So this would be sine of 5 pi over 3 minus pi over 4. And remember, sine is a sharer. So sine of 5 pi over 3 cosine pi over 4 minus cosine 5 pi over 3 sine pi over 4. And so sine of 5 pi over 3 is negative rad 3 over 2. And the pi over 4s are the easiest. Just put those in. And then cosine's a half. So simplifying this, we get negative 6 radical 6 minus radical 2 all over 4. And we check it with the calculator. Sine 17 pi over 12 is exactly the same as the negative rad 6 minus 2 over 4. All right, so what I want you to do now is to hit pause and then try the next one. And then when you undo pause, the answer will appear. So hit pause right now. And there it is. Now, obviously, the work may not be the same because you picked two different angles. If you pick the exact same ones, that's amazing. But your answer should be exactly the same. You should have negative square root of 6 over minus square root of 2 all over 4. And you should have checked it in your calculator and verified that it is correct. So that is an intro to sum and difference. Thank you.